The wind pressed against the walls like an old enemy testing her defenses. The woman moved slow, deliberate, boots scraping over warped wooden floorboards as she tended the last of the evening's chores. Outside, the storm broke open with a roar, and the lantern flame in her hand flickered against the cabin walls like it feared what might come in with the wind. She didn't flinch when thunder rolled across the prairie, nor when the tin kettle rattled slightly from the tremor. Noise didn't scare her anymore. Silence did, the kind that settled in too deep, made a home in your ribs, and called itself peace. She'd lived with it long enough to know better. The storm had ridden in sudden, with clouds so thick the sky looked bruised. She'd hauled in the last of the firewood by midday and secured the horse before the downpour. Nothing left to do but wait it out. She poured herself a tin cup of black coffee, bitter and too strong, the way she liked it. Her dog, an old cattle mutt with half a tail and no name, lifted its head from beside the stove, then set it back down. Even he knew not to expect anything new. That's when she heard it. Not a knock, not a shout, just a weight, a wrongness, settling against the cabin like something falling out of the storm. The dog's ears twitched. Then a low growl rippled from its throat. She didn't reach for her rifle. Not yet. The land had its own ghosts. Sometimes coyotes pressed too close, driven mad by hunger. Sometimes men did the same. She eased open the door with the coffee still in her hand, as if to say whatever waited out there wasn't worth breaking a cup over. At first, she saw nothing but rain cutting across the porch boards in silver streaks. Then her eyes dropped to the shape. He lay twisted near the steps, soaked and unmoving, half face down in the mud. Blood pooled beneath him, diluted by the rain into a thin red wash that ran between the planks. A bullet had caught him clean through the shoulder. She could tell by the angle of the wound and the way his body tried to curl around it, even unconscious. He was young, or had once been. The lines on his face told of hard sun, harder choices. He didn't look local. Boots were too fine, coat worn city style. His left hand twitched once, then stilled. She looked up toward the black prairie, scanning for signs of others. No horses, no lanterns, no riders chasing. Just him, just the storm. The smart thing was to leave him. Let the land take him back. Men with holes in their bodies, and no name rarely brought anything but trouble. But something in the way he was folded against the cold, the quiet desperation of it, cut through her caution. She stepped out into the rain, boots sinking into soft earth, and bent down. "You best not be lying about being alone," she muttered, hauling his arm over her shoulder. "Or I swear I'll let the wolves chew what's left." He didn't answer. His weight dragged against her as dead weight does, no resistance, no help, just pain. Inside, she laid him on the floor beside the stove, stripped off his coat, and cut away the blood-wet shirt. The wound was ugly, torn and raw, but survivable. She cleaned it in silence, boiling her good water, stitching him closed with careful, stubborn fingers. He murmured once, nonsense words. Something about a field, a girl, fire. She ignored it. When he finally stilled again, she stepped back and studied his face in the firelight. His jaw was unshaven, shadowed in stubble and grime. A man used to running, but not from work. His eyes flickered behind their lids. Dreaming, maybe. Or remembering. She sat down opposite him, her knees cracking, pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. In the corner, the dog whined once, but didn't approach. She spoke aloud, not to the man, not to the dog, just to the silence. "I've buried better men," she said flatly. "If you're here to join them, do it quiet." The storm raged until just before dawn. When it passed, it left a sky scrubbed clean of stars. Pale light leaked through the cracks in the shutters. She hadn't slept. His fever came the next night. She fed him broth with a carved wooden spoon, slow and bitter, and when he winced she grunted, "Hurts less than dying." He didn't argue. She liked that. On the third day, he opened his eyes. They were green. Not soft green, but sharp, like glass caught in sunlight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he tried to sit up and failed. "Don't," she said not unkindly. "You'll rip the stitching. And I'm not wasting more thread." He looked around the cabin, eyes flicking over the sparse furniture, the rifle by the door, the old maps tacked to the far wall. Then back to her. Where? His voice rasped like boots on gravel. Far enough, she said. Too far for trouble. I hope. He coughed, flinched, then winced again. You saved me, he said eventually. No, she replied. I kept you from dying. That's not the same thing. He gave a soft laugh. It sounded like it hurt. Name, he asked. She didn't answer. He tried again. I don't care, she cut in. Not until I know if you're worth the breath it takes to remember it. He studied her then, and something in his expression shifted. Less confusion. More understanding. You got a name? He asked. She stared back at him. No, she said. Not one that matters anymore. He nodded, like he understood something deeper than the words. Maybe he did. Later, as dusk returned and firelight brushed across the cabin walls again, he slept without groaning. His color was returning, breath steadier, wound healing. She sat in the chair beside the door, cleaning her rifle. Outside, the wind had changed. It didn't howl now. It whispered. And in its whisper, the land seemed to say, he's not the end of your silence, just the beginning of your noise. She didn't believe in omens, but she loaded the rifle anyway. It took him a week to walk again. He limped between chores like a man repaying a debt in small coins, slow, deliberate, always watching her from the corner of his eye. She never told him to help. But when he reached for the axe, she didn't stop him. When he mended the broken shutter, she only offered a quiet grunt of approval, which was the closest she came to praise. They spoke little. Words cost too much out here. The rhythm of survival was enough conversation. He fetched water from the creek while she fed the sourdough starter, patched his shirt while she sharpened the knife. Even in silence, something shifted. Not warmth. Not yet. But a truce. He didn't ask to leave, though the trail was open and the wound mostly healed. She waited for the question, the goodbye, but it never came. One morning, as the frost still clung to the grass and the sky hung low with fog, she saddled the horse. You're coming with me, she said. He blinked. Where? Town, she said, swinging into the saddle. I need flour. You need a name. He hesitated, one hand on the saddle horn. I don't. Won't be asking, she said, voice sharp as wind over rock. You've been breathing my air long enough. Time folks see who. He climbed up without another word. The town was 10 miles west, a scatter of buildings between two hills, strung along a main road that always looked windblown and unfinished. When they rode in, people stopped what they were doing. Hammers paused. Doors creaked closed. Eyes tracked them like vultures circling a dying thing. She rode straight to the general store, dismounted, and handed him the reins. He held them awkwardly, unsure where to tie off. She left him standing there while she filled her sack with cornmeal, beans, and coffee. By the time she returned, the sheriff was waiting. He was a thick man with a badge that caught sunlight like it was proud of itself. His boots were polished, but his eyes were dull. You been harboring a man in your cabin? He asked without preamble. She met his gaze. I found him bleeding in the dirt. Not what I asked. I didn't know men needed permission to not die, she said. The sheriff's lip curled. He turned to the man, eyes scanning his face. Name. The man's jaw tensed. Don't rightly know. The sheriff snorted. Convenient. Behind them, someone muttered something about unclean. Another voice hissed, sinful. The sound rippled through the onlookers like dry grass catching flame. The preacher emerged next. Long coat, white collar, face like an unused shovel, clean, cold, unyielding. He looked from one to the other. This town has laws, he said, as if speaking to children. A woman cannot host an unmarried man overnight without her name being tarnished, especially not in secrecy. I didn't host him, she said flatly. I stopped him from bleeding to death. Call it what you want, the preacher replied. But you've tied yourself to sin. The law says marriage or punishment. For both. She laughed then, one sharp, bitter breath. I've been punished, she said. Just not by your books. Then let the books redeem you, the preacher replied. A ceremony. Quick. Clean. Restore what's been dirted. She turned to the man. Say something. His lips parted, then closed again. His eyes flicked to the people, the guns, the whispered judgment curling like smoke in every doorway. I owe you, he said softly. If this is the price. She stepped back. Don't make this sound like a favor. It's a tether, he replied, but maybe one I need. The preacher lifted his Bible. 10 minutes later, they were husband and wife in name only. No rings. No vows worth remembering. Just words muttered under breath and a cold wind slicing through the crowd. She didn't look at him on the ride back. That night, he sat near the fire, coat folded beside him, staring into the flames like they held answers. She moved around him like a shadow, never closer than necessary. You think I wanted this? She asked finally. No, he said. I buried one husband already. He didn't answer right away. Then, and now you've buried a name beside him. She looked at him for a long moment, then went to her bed without another word. In the weeks that followed, they fell into a rhythm that wasn't quite companionship, but wasn't war either. He built a shelf for her spices. She made an extra cup of coffee in the mornings. Neither spoke of the paper that said they were bound, nor the people who forced the ink upon them. But there were shifts. Subtle. He began waking from dreams he couldn't shake. She'd hear him muttering in the dark, names, numbers, something about fire. Once he shouted, bolting upright. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. She spent more time at the window, watching, listening. One evening, a letter came. No postmark. No return name. Just his name, scrawled across the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. He didn't open it in front of her. She found the envelope days later, tucked behind the flour sack. The seal broken. The letter missing. She said nothing. But that night, she loaded her rifle again before bed. And outside, beneath the soft hush of prairie wind, a new scent curled in the air. Gun oil. And dust that didn't belong. Something was coming. And it wore boots. The tracks by the well weren't hers. Too deep, too deliberate. Heavy boots, iron-nailed. 3 days old, maybe 2. Long enough for the wind to shift the soil, but not erase the shape. She crouched beside them, fingers brushing the edge of a heel print, then rose and scanned the horizon. Empty, but the kind of empty that held breath. He stood by the cabin's sidewall, splitting kindling. She watched him for a long second before speaking. You expecting someone? He straightened slowly, the axe hanging from one hand. Not lately. Someone's been watching, she said. Left a trail bold as brass. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened on the axe handle. They follow you, she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he leaned the axe against the woodpile and met her eyes. I thought I buried that part of my life. Guess I just misplaced it. She stepped closer. Tell me. He hesitated. Then, like an old dam finally giving, the words came. I was with the 8th Cavalry out of Fort Baylor. War years. Skirmishes. Some justified. Some weren't. He rubbed the back of his neck like the memory was still warm. One village, winter, high canyon country. Orders were clear. Burn it out. Didn't ask questions. Just followed command. She folded her arms, listening. I disobeyed. Warned a few. Helped some escape into the cliffs. Got caught. Court-martialed. But I ran before they could hang the charge. Been running ever since. And now someone wants to finish the hanging, she said. He nodded. That letter? It came from a man named Brenner. Sergeant then. Now he works bounty for hire. Said he's close. Said the next time I see sky, it might be from the end of a rope. She didn't curse. Didn't shout. Just stared at him like she was watching a man measure his own grave. You brought this to my door. I didn't mean to. That doesn't change that you did. He looked away, shame cutting across his face like a shadow. I'll leave tonight. Don't want trouble for you. She laughed, sharp and without humor. You think the trouble ends if you vanish into the brush? They won't stop. Not until blood's been spilled. He stepped forward. Then I'll spill mine before yours is touched. She didn't flinch. If you're staying, you don't just sit in my house. You fight for it. His voice softened. You really want to fight beside a man the world already condemned? I'm a woman, this land spat out twice. Don't talk to me about condemnation. They spent the rest of the day in preparation. He dug new shooting lines behind the brush, marked distances with rock cairns. She checked the ammunition, oiled the rifle, and laid snares around the perimeter. The silence between them was different now, purposeful, heavy with decision rather than regret. That night, she found him on the porch sharpening a blade. Firelight from inside painted his face with a flickering glow. She sat beside him, her own knife in hand. I had a daughter, she said, eyes on the stars. Small thing. Laughed at frogs. She disappeared one winter, deep snow, no tracks. Husband blamed the land. I blamed him. Buried them both in different ways. He didn't speak, just waited. I've carried death before, but I don't plan to carry yours. He turned his face toward her. Then let's make sure I don't need burying. The first signs came with morning frost. A crow, black and slow, drifted across the treeline, then vanished. The dog growled low from under the porch. She spotted the glint first, metal-catching sun from the east ridge. A scope, then the shift of leather on stone. 3 men. 1 rifle, 1 repeater, 1 with a knife strapped to each thigh. Wolves in human skins. They didn't approach, just watched, calculating. She crouched low inside the cabin, lining the windows with old quilts to mute light and sound. They want us to panic, he said, crouched beside her. Flush us out. Let them wait, she replied. The land favors the still. By late afternoon, they circled closer. The one with knives stepped out first. He had a scar down one cheek and teeth too white for the dirt on his boots. Bring him out, he shouted. We got a rope and a bounty writ. She stepped onto the porch, rifle resting easy in her arms. Got a cabin and a graveyard. You pick. The man grinned. Lady, you married a ghost. Time to put him down. Her shot cut the air before his smile finished. Wood beside his boot splintered. He ducked back behind the brush. The shootout began at dusk. Gunfire snapped through the clearing. Smoke bloomed from the windows. He covered the east flank while she held the front. Her hands moved like memory, no wasted shots, no second-guessing. He was slower but steady, precise. One of them went down before dark, a scream swallowed by prairie silence. But the others pressed on. Inside, blood ran down his shoulder. Another wound, shallow but enough to slow him. I'll draw them away, he said, sweat glinting at his temple. You stay. You live. She stepped in front of him, rifle raised. You move, I shoot you myself. He stared at her, something ancient burning in his gaze. Why? Because I've had enough graves in my yard. Outside, the final man came fast, flanking through the side entrance, knife drawn, silent as dusk. She turned too late. The man lunged. She stumbled. And then the settler pulled the trigger from across the room. The blade dropped. So did the bounty hunter. She turned to see the man's chest heaving, hand still gripping the smoking gun. You all right? He asked, voice low. She nodded, knees trembling. Now you owe me, he said. She almost smiled. When the sheriff arrived 2 days later, the corpses were already buried. The lawman asked questions. She answered in glances. Bounty work gone wrong, he guessed. Looks like, she said. No charges. Not for ghosts. He rode off without ceremony. That night, she found the man cleaning the porch. His wound was healing. His eyes softer. Still think about leaving? She asked. He shook his head. Not unless you push me. I've pushed worse men. He laughed. I believe it. She sat beside him, silence stretching like dusk across the sky. And for the first time, they both looked toward tomorrow. The frost came early that year, the kind that clung to the porch rail and turned every breath into smoke. He stood barefoot at the edge of the steps, watching the morning creep in across the prairie, rifle slung low, steam curling from a chipped mug in his hands. Behind him, she stirred the fire to life, the crackle of flame matching the rhythm of her thoughts. They hadn't spoken much since the shootout. Not because there was nothing to say, but because too much of it sat between them, heavy and wordless. She could feel the change in him. He moved differently now, not like a man waiting to run. He had started mending the barn roof, one board at a time, humming low tunes she didn't recognize. He asked questions about the land, what grew where, how the water table shifted in spring. And at night, when they lay beneath the same roof, he no longer curled away from her voice. He listened. But peace never stays long out here. The rider came just before dusk, kicking up dust along the old cattle trail, lean and dark against the dying sun. She saw him first, just a silhouette at first, but there was something rigid in his posture, something that reminded her of bayonets and burned letters. She leaned the broom against the wall and reached for her rifle. He stepped outside without asking. One look at her face told him what he needed. "You know him?" "No," she said. "But he knows one of us." The rider dismounted slow, careful. A long scar crossed his chin like a drawn blade. His boots were polished, his hat untouched by prairie wind. He looked around the cabin like he was measuring how long it would take to burn it down. "I'm here for what's mine," the man said. She stepped forward. "There's nothing here for you but quiet." "I ain't talking to you, woman," he said. The settler stepped down from the porch. His voice was steady. "Hello, Brenner." The man's lip curled. "You married now? Didn't think you had it in you. All those years with your tail tucked, hiding in holes like a rat." "I stopped running." "No," Brenner said. "You paused." He tossed a small pouch into the dirt. It landed with a metallic thud. Inside, they both knew, was a bounty marker, government stamped, signed and paid. Legal or not, it was a death warrant. "I've got a badge now," Brenner said. "Different kind of war, but the guns still fire the same. I'll make it clean." No need for her to see. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. "I was afraid you'd say that." She stepped between them, rifle cocked. "You fire that thing," Brenner warned, "and every lawman between here and Abilene will ride to bury you both." "You fire yours," she said, "and you won't live long enough to see which way the wind carries your name." Brenner's eyes narrowed. Then he turned his horse and rode off without another word. No threat. No farewell. That night she didn't sleep. Neither did he. By morning, the prairie was still, but it was the kind of stillness that comes before thunder. They prepped the cabin again, this time not for shadows or scouts, but for a man who carried death with him like a second spine. They dug firing lines and loaded shells, reinforced the porch, laid lanterns along the trail to blind any riders that came at dusk. And, as the sun fell behind the hills again, they waited. He spoke first, voice low, steady. "If I die, bury me next to the creek." "Don't talk like that." "I'm not afraid," he said. "Not anymore." "You should be," she replied. "Men like him don't fight fair." "Neither do women like you," he said, and she smiled. The first shot cracked the silence just past midnight. Glass shattered. Smoke followed. Brenner came with two men, both mounted, rifles blazing. The lanterns lit up their eyes like demons. She took the first one down before he reached the corral. The second fired wild, bullets splitting wood and sky. He hit the porch railing but never made it to the stairs. Then it was Brenner, alone, on foot, slipping through the dark like a wolf. He got inside before either of them knew. She turned, saw the door half open, the wind curling in. Then the sound, a thud, a crash, a sharp gasp. She ran in and found the settler on the floor, blood blooming through his shirt. Brenner stood above him, knife red at the edge, gun in the other hand. "I told you," he said, voice even. "I came to finish it." Her rifle was too far. The pistol on the mantel was closer, but not close enough. But the fire poker, black and iron, was beside her hand. She moved. Fast. Steel met jaw. Bone cracked. Brenner stumbled, fired once, missed. The shot blew out the window behind her. She hit him again, this time across the temple. He dropped. The silence afterward was deafening. She turned to the settler, blood on her hands, his breathing shallow. "You're not dying," she whispered. He smiled, even through the pain. "You always so sure?" "Always." Outside, the sun had begun to rise. Orange and gold spilled across the sky like something holy. The kind of light you don't earn, but get anyway. She stitched his wound, cleaned the floor, and burned Brenner's bounty letter in the stove. The sheriff came a day later, took one look at the blood, the body, and the man on the bed, and tipped his hat. "Nothing here worth reporting," he said. "Looks like the wind just got mean one night." "Wind does that," she said. Months passed. They rebuilt the porch, planted new beans. She started leaving the cabin door open during the day. He carved her a rocking chair from cedar. Sometimes they sat together at twilight, not saying much, just watching the land breathe. One evening, he placed a wrapped bundle in her lap. Inside was a baby blanket, hand-stitched, old, faded blue. "I found it," he said, "in the bottom of the trunk. Must have been your daughter's." She didn't speak, just held it close. He watched her a long time, then said, "Maybe this land doesn't forget, but maybe it forgives." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Only if we let it." He nodded, and for the first time, they both believed it.